My name is Chloe, and I'm 32 years old. I can still remember the exact moment my parents abandoned me in a mall parking lot when I was 5. I watched their car disappear into traffic while melted ice cream dripped down my pink jacket. I waited for hours, believing they'd come back. They never did. 27 years later, those same people who threw me away like trash served me with a lawsuit demanding $2.7 million. The money my real father, the man who actually raised me, left me in his will. You want to know how people who abandoned their child in a shopping mall had the audacity to demand her inheritance? Buckle up, because this story gets worse before it gets better. Before we dive into this wild ride, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever felt abandoned or betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you, hit that like button. And subscribe, because you'll want to hear how this nightmare finally ended. Trust me, the courtroom showdown was absolutely savage. Now, let me take you back to where it all started, that cold December day when my childhood ended. It was a Saturday morning in December, and I remember feeling excited. My parents, Warren and Jolene, told me we were going on a special shopping trip to Riverside Mall. Special trips didn't happen in our house. Money was always tight, arguments were constant, and I'd learned early to stay quiet and invisible. But that morning felt different. Jolene helped me put on my favorite pink jacket, the one with the fuzzy hood. Warren seemed nervous, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel during the entire drive. They kept whispering to each other, voices too low for me to understand. When we got to the mall, the crowds overwhelmed me. Holiday shoppers pushed past us in waves. The decorations sparkled overhead, and Christmas music played from speakers I couldn't see. We walked through the main corridor, Warren holding my hand tighter than usual. His palm was sweaty. Jolene wouldn't look at me. She kept her eyes forward, jaw clenched, like she was marching towards something terrible. I remember asking if I'd done something wrong. She just shook her head and said nothing. We ended up at the food court. The smell of pizza and cinnamon rolls filled the air. Warren bought me an ice cream cone, chocolate with sprinkles. This was beyond unusual. They never bought me treats. My stomach twisted with confusion, but I took it anyway. We sat at a sticky table near the fountain. I licked the ice cream slowly, trying to make it last, while they sat across from me in silence. The silence felt heavy, suffocating. After what seemed like forever, Warren knelt down beside me. His eyes were red, like he'd been crying or hadn't slept. He touched my cheek once, briefly, and said 4 words that would haunt me for decades. "Wait here, we'll be right back." I nodded, ice cream cone in hand, watching them stand up. Jolene finally looked at me then. Tears ran down her face, but she didn't say anything. No goodbye, no explanation, nothing. They walked away quickly, disappearing into the crowd. I sat there, obedient child that I was, eating my ice cream and waiting. The ice cream melted faster than I could eat it. It dripped onto my pink jacket, leaving brown stains. I waited. Shoppers passed by, laughing and carrying bags. I waited. The overhead lights seemed to get brighter, harsher. I waited. Hours crawled by. The food court emptied and refilled with different crowds. Lunch turned to dinner. My ice cream cone was long gone, just a sticky mess on the table. A security guard noticed me sitting alone as the sky outside turned dark. He was a large man with kind eyes and a thick mustache. He asked where my parents were. I told him they went shopping and would be right back. He waited with me for another hour. Then he called for backup. More security came. They asked me questions I couldn't answer. What was my last name? Where did I live? What was my phone number? I was 5. I didn't know these things. The mall closed around us. Metal gates rattled down over storefronts. The music stopped. The lights dimmed. And still, no parents. Police arrived next. A female officer with blonde hair pulled into a tight bun knelt beside me. She had a gentle voice, but her questions scared me. Had my parents seemed upset? Did they say anything about going away? I told her about the ice cream, about Warren's red eyes, about how Jolene cried. She exchanged glances with her partner that I didn't understand then but recognize now. Pity mixed with anger. They took me to the police station. Bright fluorescent lights, cold plastic chairs, and the smell of burnt coffee. I sat wrapped in someone's jacket that was too big for me, waiting for my parents to come get me. A detective made phone calls, typed on a computer, spoke in hushed tones to other officers. Around midnight, a woman arrived. Mrs. Patricia Caldwell, a social worker with tired eyes and a soft cardigan. She sat beside me and explained in simple words that my parents weren't coming tonight, that I'd be staying somewhere safe until they figured things out. That first night in emergency foster care, I slept in a strange bed in a strange house with strange people. I cried until I had no tears left, then lay awake staring at shadows on the ceiling. I kept expecting to hear Warren's voice calling my name, Jolani's footsteps coming to get me. Morning came. They didn't. Days passed. They didn't. I asked Mrs. Caldwell every time I saw her if my parents were looking for me. She'd press her lips together and change the subject. 3 weeks later, she sat me down and told me the truth in words a 5-year-old could barely comprehend. My parents had deliberately left me at that mall. There was no missing persons report filed, no frantic calls to police, no searching. The investigation revealed Warren and Jolene had serious gambling debts, financial troubles that had spiraled out of control. They had 3 other children, all younger than me, all from their relationship together. I was from Jolene's previous relationship, a reminder of her past. When the money got tight and the pressure got worse, they made a choice. They kept the children they both created and threw away the one that didn't quite fit. The detective found them 2 days after the abandonment. They admitted everything. Said they couldn't afford 4 kids. Said they thought someone would take care of me. Said it seemed like the only option. They were charged with child abandonment, given probation, and allowed to keep their other 3 children. And I became a ward of the state. Another file in an overloaded system, another kid nobody wanted. That's when the nightmares started. Every night, I dreamed of sitting in that food court, ice cream melting, waiting forever for parents who would never return. I developed attachment issues that would take decades to even begin healing. The fear of being left behind became a constant companion, a shadow that followed me everywhere. Because if your own parents can leave you in a mall like a piece of forgotten luggage, what does that say about you? What does that make you? Mrs. Caldwell placed me with my first foster family 2 months after the abandonment. The Mercers lived in a split-level house in a neighborhood that looked normal from the outside. Dale Mercer was a plumber with rough hands and a loud voice. Eunice Mercer was a homemaker who smiled too much, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. They had 3 biological children, all boys, all older than me. The first week, they treated me carefully, like a fragile thing that might break. Eunice showed me to my room, a converted storage space that still smelled like cardboard and mothballs. She gave me hand-me-down clothes that were too big and a stuffed bear that was missing one eye. Dale patted my head and told me to be good. I promised I would be. I promised so hard. But the careful treatment didn't last. By the second week, the real dynamic revealed itself. I was there to work. While the Mercer boys played video games and roughhoused in the yard, I scrubbed dishes standing on a stool to reach the sink. I folded laundry, swept floors, cleaned bathrooms. At 6 years old, I was their unpaid servant. Eunice would stand over me, criticizing every missed spot, every wrinkle in the towels. If I didn't do it right, she'd make me start over. Meals became a hierarchy. The boys ate first, piling their plates high with whatever Eunice cooked. Dale ate next, then Eunice. I ate last, whatever scraps remained. Some nights, that meant a spoonful of cold vegetables and a piece of bread. I learned to eat fast when food was available because I never knew when the next meal would come. I started hoarding snacks in my room, crackers and apple slices wrapped in napkins, hidden in the back of my tiny closet. The real nightmare was the basement. The Mercers had a finished basement with concrete floors and a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. Whenever I misbehaved, which could mean anything from talking back to not cleaning fast enough. Dale would grab my arm and drag me down there. He'd lock the door, turn off the light, and leave me in complete darkness, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for half a day. The darkness was absolute, suffocating. I'd curl into a ball on the cold floor, counting my heartbeats to stay calm, singing songs under my breath so I wouldn't forget the sound of my own voice. The first attack happened 4 months into my stay. One of the Mercer boys, the middle one named Kyle, claimed I stole money from his room. I didn't. I never stole anything. But Eunice believed her son without question. She grabbed me by my hair, dragged me to my room, and told me I wouldn't eat for 3 days as punishment. 3 days. I was 6 years old. By the second day I was so dizzy I could barely stand. By the third, I tried to sneak food from the kitchen at night and got caught. Dale locked me in the basement for 6 hours. I told my teacher at school what was happening. Mrs. Morrison, a young woman fresh out of college with idealistic eyes. She promised shed help, she called social services. A caseworker came to inspect the house. But Eunice was smart. She cleaned everything, put food in my room, coached the boys on what to say. When the caseworker interviewed me with Eunice present, I saw the warning in her eyes. I said everything was fine. The caseworker left. That night, Eunice called me a liar and a troublemaker. She slapped me across the face, hard enough to leave a red mark that faded by morning. I lasted 8 months with the Mercers. The end came when a substitute teacher noticed the bruises on my arms during gym class. This teacher didn't call ahead. She took photos and went straight to the principal, who called the police. I was removed that afternoon. Eunice cried and played the victim, claiming I was a difficult child who hurt myself for attention. The investigation took weeks, but eventually, the pattern became clear. I wasn't their first foster child, and I wasn't the first to be abused. The Mercers lost their foster license, but the damage to me was already done. My second placement seemed like a dream at first. The Richardsons lived in a beautiful 2-story home with a manicured lawn and a golden retriever named Buddy. Marvin Richardson worked in insurance sales. Glenda Richardson volunteered at church. They welcomed me with open arms, warm meals, and a bedroom that had actual decorations. I thought maybe finally I'd found safety. I was wrong. Marvin started with comments. Little things that made my skin crawl but were hard to explain. He'd tell me I looked pretty in certain outfits. He'd insist on hugging me goodnight, holding on too long. He'd find excuses to be alone with me, offering to help with homework or drive me to activities. When I was 7, he started trying to come into my room at night. I'd hear the doorknob turn, see the crack of light widen. The first time, I pretended to be asleep. He stood in the doorway for what felt like hours, just watching. After that, I pushed my dresser against the door every night. It was heavy, made awful scraping sounds against the floor, but it kept him out. Glenda knew. I'm certain she knew. She'd see me struggling with the dresser, see the fear in my eyes, but she'd look away and say nothing. When I finally gathered the courage to tell her directly that Marvin made me uncomfortable, she got angry at me, said I had an overactive imagination, said I should be grateful they took me in, said if I kept making up stories, they'd send me back. I told Mrs. Caldwell during one of her monthly check-ins. I told her everything. The comments, the doorway visits, the way Marvin looked at me. She believed me, thank God. She launched an investigation immediately. But investigations take time. Bureaucracy moves slowly. I had to stay in that house for 2 more months while they gathered evidence, conducted interviews, built a case. 2 months of pushing furniture against my door every night, of avoiding being alone with Marvin, of Glenda's cold glares that blamed me for ruining their reputation. The other foster kids in the house, 2 boys who'd been there longer, turned on me. Glenda told them I was a troublemaker trying to destroy their family. They made my life hell, hid my school books, spread rumors at school, pushed me down during recess. The isolation was crushing. I stopped eating properly, my weight dropped, and dark circles formed under my eyes. I was 7 years old, and I looked like a ghost. When the investigation finally concluded and Marvin Richardson was charged, when I was finally removed from that house, I didn't feel relief. I felt numb, used up, like something fundamental inside me had broken beyond repair. My third placement wasn't a family. It was a group home, a large facility that housed 23 kids ranging from ages 5 to 17. It was essentially a warehouse for children nobody wanted. The staff were overworked and underpaid, stretched too thin to provide real care or supervision. We were just numbers, beds to be filled, meals to be distributed, problems to be managed. The older kids ruled that place through intimidation and violence. If you were small or weak, you became a target. I was both. Bigger kids stole my belongings, what little I had. The few clothes I owned would disappear from my drawer, the stuffed bear Mrs. Caldwell gave me was torn apart and thrown in the trash. I learned to keep everything I cared about on my body at all times. There was a girl named Shayla, 15 years old, built like a linebacker, with eyes that held no empathy. She decided I was her personal punching bag. Started with verbal abuse, calling me names, mocking how I talked. Escalated to physical. She'd corner me in the bathroom, push me around, take whatever food I had. One day, she pushed me down the stairs. I tumbled, hitting my shoulder hard on the railing, landing in a heap at the bottom. Pain shot through my arm. I couldn't lift it for days. I fought back once, only once. She cornered me in the common room, tried to take my dinner tray. Something inside me snapped. All the fear, all the anger, all the accumulated trauma exploded out. I swung the tray at her face. It connected with a satisfying crack. She stumbled back, shocked. Then she came at me with fists. We fought, really fought, rolling on the floor, scratching and hitting. Staff pulled us apart. We both got punished equally. Same consequence. Same lecture about violence. Nobody cared that she'd been tormenting me for months. Nobody cared that I was defending myself. That's when I learned the system didn't care about justice. It cared about control, about keeping order, about making their jobs easier. Victims and bullies got treated the same. I spent my 8th birthday in that group home. No cake, no presents, no celebration, just another day of survival. That night, lying in my bunk bed, listening to the sounds of 22 other kids breathing, crying, arguing, I made a decision. I would trust no one. I would keep my emotions locked away. I would become hard, unreachable. It was the only way to survive. Everything changed when I was 7.5. The group home hosted a community event, local volunteers coming to do crafts and activities with us. Most of the kids went wild, excited for the attention and the donated snacks. I sat in the corner of the common room with a book, one of the few intact ones in the facility's sad excuse for a library. It was a science fiction novel way above my reading level, but had been teaching myself to read advanced books because they took me away from reality. A man approached me. I looked up, defensive, ready to move if I needed to. He was older, maybe in his early 60s, with gray hair and glasses that made his eyes look kind. He wore a cardigan with patches on the elbows and smiled at me in a way that seemed genuine. He pointed to my book and asked if I liked it. I nodded, suspicious. Adults in my experience wanted something. He sat down, not too close, respecting my space, and started talking about the book. Actually talking, like he'd read it, like he understood the themes and characters. His name was Frederick Ashford, but he insisted I call him Fred. He was a retired engineer, widowed, no children of his own. He'd started volunteering at the group home after his wife died, looking for ways to fill his time. We talked about the book for 20 minutes. He didn't talk down to me, didn't treat me like a damaged foster kid. He treated me like a person with thoughts worth hearing. The next week, he came back. He brought a new book for me, another science fiction novel. This one was in better condition, with an inscription on the inside cover that said, "For Chloe, who sees beyond the stars." Nobody had ever given me something new before, something meant just for me. I held that book like it was made of gold. Fred came every week after that. Sometimes we'd read together. Sometimes we'd talk about school, about what I was learning, about my favorite subjects. He never pushed, never pried into my trauma. He let me be. And slowly, over months, I started to trust him. Just a little. Just enough to look forward to his visits, to smile when I saw him come through the door. The other kids noticed. Some were jealous. A few tried to sabotage what Fred and I had. They'd hide the books he brought me. They'd tell staff Fred was inappropriate, trying to get him banned from the facility. One girl, older and mean, told me Fred would get bored and leave just like everyone else, that I was stupid for thinking anyone actually cared about me. I tried to believe her. It would hurt less when he inevitably disappeared. But Fred didn't disappear. 6 months after we met, he asked Mrs. Caldwell about adoption procedures. I didn't know this at the time. He didn't want to get my hopes up in case it didn't work out. He spent weeks navigating the bureaucracy, filling out applications, undergoing background checks. When Mrs. Caldwell finally told me Fred wanted to adopt me, I didn't believe her. It felt like a cruel joke. She took me to visit Fred's house. It was modest, a small single-story home in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy but clean and warm. Had set up a room for me. Painted the walls blue because Id once mentioned liking that color. Filled a bookshelf with novels. Put a comfortable bed with a quilt his late wife had made. He showed me around nervously, like he was afraid I wouldn't like it. I stood in that room and cried. Not sad tears, overwhelmed tears. Someone had prepared a space for me. Someone wanted me to stay. But wanting isn't the same as getting. The adoption process was brutal. Social services hesitated because Fred was a single older man wanting to adopt a girl. It was unusual. It raised questions. They subjected him to intense scrutiny, far more than they'd given my abusive foster parents. Background checks, psychological evaluations, home studies, interviews with anyone who'd ever known him. Then came the attack from my past. Eunice Mercer, my first foster mother, the one who'd locked me in basements and starved me, wrote a letter to social services opposing the adoption. She claimed I was a disturbed child with behavioral problems, that placing me with an elderly single man was dangerous. Her letter was full of lies, but it carried weight. Officials questioned whether I was too damaged, too problematic for adoption, whether Fred knew what he was getting into. Fred hired a lawyer. He fought through every objection, every delay, every bureaucratic obstacle. The process took 9 months. 9 months of me living in the group home, terrified that something would go wrong, that this chance would slip away like every other good thing in my life. I had panic attacks. I stopped sleeping. I'd sneak looks at the room Fred had prepared for me during visits, afraid to let myself believe it would really be mine. The final court date arrived. Judge Bernard Whitmore, a stern man with white hair and a reputation for being tough but fair, presided over the hearing. Head reviewed all the files, all the evaluations, all the letters for and against. He called me into his chambers. Just him and me. No lawyers or social workers. He asked me one question. Did I want Frederick Ashford to be my father? It was the first time in my life an adult had asked me what I wanted. Asked me to make a choice about my own life. I looked at this judge, this powerful man who held my future in his hands, and I said yes, yes, I wanted Fred. Yes, I wanted that blue room and those books, and someone who looked at me like I mattered. Yes, please, I wanted a home. Judge Whitmore approved the adoption. Fred cried in the courtroom. This grown man, this engineer Huda, spent his life being logical and controlled, wept openly when the judge signed the papers. I didn't cry. I was too shocked, too afraid that if I blinked it would all disappear. Mrs. Caldwell hugged me, whispered that I deserved this, that I was going to be okay now. I wanted to believe her. Moving into Fred's house felt surreal. I kept waiting for the catch, for the moment when he'd change, when the mask would drop and reveal another monster underneath. But weeks passed, then months, and Fred stayed Fred. Patient, kind, steady, he gave me space to adjust, never forced affection, never made me call him Dad unless I wanted to. He was just there, consistently, showing up every day. He taught me that not all adults were dangerous. that not everyone would hurt me. It was a lesson that took years to truly absorb, but he was patient enough to wait. The first few months in Fred's house were harder than I expected. He'd survived so much trauma that my body and brain didn't know how to exist in safety. I had panic attacks over small things. If Fred raised his voice even slightly, even just to call me from another room, it'd freeze. My heart would race, my vision would tunnel, and it'd be back in that basement or that bedroom pushing furniture against the door. I hoarded food. Fred would find stashes of crackers, granola bars, and fruit hidden in my closet, under my bed, in my dresser drawers. He never punished me for it. Instead, he sat me down and gently explained that food would always be available, that I never had to worry about going hungry again. He started keeping snacks in my room openly, in a basket I could access any time. It took almost a year before I stopped hiding food. Fred got me into therapy with Dr. Linda Hartman, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma. Dr. Hartman had kind eyes and never pushed me to talk before I was ready. She taught me coping mechanisms, ways to manage the panic attacks and nightmares. She helped me understand that what happened to me wasn't my fault, that I didn't deserve any of it. That lesson was the hardest to absorb. Fred taught me other things. He taught me chess, explaining strategies and patterns with patience I'd never experienced. He taught me science through experiments in the kitchen, making volcanoes out of baking soda and vinegar, explaining chemical reactions in terms I could understand. He encouraged my reading, discussing books with me like I was his intellectual equal even though I was 8 years old. He showed me that learning could be joyful, that curiosity was something to nurture, not punish. He never mentioned my biological parents unless I brought them up. A few times, I asked why they left me. Fred would get this sad look and say he didn't know, that sometimes people made terrible choices that had nothing to do with the worth of their children. He'd remind me that I was valued, that I was wanted, that I belonged here with him. I wanted so badly to believe him. Starting a new school brought new challenges. Fred enrolled me in the local elementary school, 3rd grade. The other kids asked questions I didn't know how to answer. Where were my parents? Why did I live with an old man? Was he my grandpa? I'd stumble through explanations. Embarrassed. Different. Word got around that I was a foster kid who got adopted, and some parents looked at us with suspicion. One girl in particular, Tiffany Brennan, made my life miserable. She was pretty and popular, the kind of kid who led through cruelty. She started rumors that Fred was weird, that the adoption was inappropriate. Her mother, Candace, was even worse. Candace was on the PTA and used her position to spread gossip among other parents. She made pointed comments about how unusual the adoption was, how single, elderly men shouldn't be raising young girls. She implied things without saying them directly, letting other people's imaginations fill in the blanks. The rumors reached the school administration. They launched an investigation, calling Fred in for meetings, interviewing me with social workers present. I was terrified they'd take me away, that I'd lose this home just when I was starting to feel safe. The investigation found nothing because there was nothing to find. Fred was cleared completely. But the damage to his reputation lingered. Some parents pulled their kids away from me at pickup. Playdates I'd been invited to got mysteriously canceled. Fred handled it with grace I couldn't fathom. He didn't get angry or bitter. He just kept showing up, kept being present, kept proving through his actions that he was exactly who he claimed to be. And he found me allies. Mr. Raymond Ellis, my 4th grade teacher, saw what was happening and became an advocate. He recognized my intelligence, encouraged my participation, and shut down any bullying he witnessed. He treated Fred with respect and warmth, which influenced other parents to reconsider their judgments. I joined the debate team in 5th grade. Mr. Ellis suggested it, thought it would give me an outlet for my thoughts and help me build confidence. I was terrified at first, standing in front of people, arguing positions, but something clicked. All the anger I'd been holding, all the injustice I'd experienced, it fueled my arguments. I was good at it, really good. I started winning competitions. Fred came to every single one, sat in the audience beaming with pride, celebrated my victories like they were Olympic gold medals. Middle school brought its own struggles. Puberty, social hierarchies, the desperate need to fit in. I didn't fit in. My past made sure of that. But I had Fred, and I had my books, and I had debate team. I built a small circle of friends, other kids who existed on the margins. We weren't popular, but we had each other. Fred's relatives were another source of pain. He had a brother, Clarence Ashford, who thought the adoption was foolish. Clarence visited once when I was 12. He made snide comments about Fred wasting his retirement on a charity case, questioned whether I was grateful enough, implied I was using Fred for his money. Fred kicked him out of the house mid-sentence. I'd never seen Fred angry before. He was shaking as he shut the door, then turned to me and said something I'll never forget. "You are not a charity case. You are my daughter, my choice, my family. Anyone who can't see your value doesn't deserve space in our lives." He cut Clarence off completely after that. Chose me over blood family. That meant more than any words could express. High school was better. I'd learned how to navigate social dynamics, how to be friendly without being vulnerable, how to protect myself while still engaging with the world. I excelled academically. Fred supported every interest, every dream. When I said I wanted to study business, he helped me research colleges. When I stressed about SAT scores, he hired a tutor. When I worried about money, he assured me he'd saved for my education. I won a partial scholarship to the state university. When the acceptance letter came, Fred and I both cried. He'd never pushed college on me, never demanded I achieve certain things, but his pride in that moment filled the house. We celebrated with dinner at my favorite restaurant, and he gave me a gift, a leather journal with my initials embossed on the cover. Inside the front page, he'd written, "For Chloe, who turned pain into purpose. I'm proud of the woman you're becoming." I was 17 years old, about to leave for college, and for the first time in my life, I felt like maybe I was going to be okay. Maybe the nightmare was over. Maybe I could build something good from all that rubble. I started at State University that fall, studying business management. The campus was overwhelming at first. Thousands of students, sprawling buildings, a level of independence I'd never experienced. Fred helped me move into the dorms, setting up my small room with the same care he'd shown when preparing my first room in his house. He hugged me goodbye and told me to call anytime, that he was proud of me, that I could do this. The first semester was rough. Academically, I thrived. Socially, I struggled. I didn't know how to do the casual friendship thing, the dorm bonding, the late-night conversations. My past made me guarded. I couldn't participate in those tell me about your family icebreakers without lying or shutting down. But I found my rhythm. I focused on classes, joined business clubs, kept my head down and my grades up. Second semester, I met Bryn Cooper. She was in my economics class, smart and funny, with an easy confidence I envied. She started sitting next to me, making jokes during boring lectures, inviting me to study groups. Slowly, carefully, I let her in. She was the first real friend I'd had, someone I trusted with pieces of my story. When I finally told her about my childhood, she didn't pity me or treat me differently. She just said that explained why I was so tough, and she was glad I'd survived. I also met Miles Thornton that year. He was an engineering student, tall and awkward in an endearing way, with a passion for building things. We met at a campus coffee shop, both reaching for the same study table. He offered to share. We ended up talking for 3 hours, and I forgot to study entirely. He asked me out the next week. I said yes, terrified and excited in equal measure. Dating was complicated. Intimacy, even emotional intimacy, triggered my past trauma. Miles was patient, never pushed, let me set the pace. I told him about Fred, about the adoption, about some of the foster care experiences. I didn't tell him everything. Some wounds were too deep to expose yet, but he saw enough to understand why I was the way I was, and he cared about me anyway. I worked part-time despite Fred offering full financial support. I needed to prove to myself I could stand on my own, that I wasn't dependent, that I could survive without someone taking care of me. I worked retail, then tutoring, then a paid internship with a marketing firm. The money wasn't much, but earning it myself felt essential. Then, spring of my junior year, a ghost from my past appeared. I was walking across campus to class when someone called my name. Not just my name, my full name. The one I'd had before Fred adopted me, before I became Chloe Ashford. I turned and saw Glenda Richardson, my second foster mother, the one who'd let her husband prey on me. She looked older, worn down, but I recognized her instantly. My body went cold. She approached with this fake concern on her face, saying she'd been looking for me, that she wanted to apologize for the past. But her eyes told a different story. She needed something. After a few minutes of awkward conversation, she got to the point. She was in financial trouble, medical bills, debt, all her own poor choices coming home to roost. She said I owed her, that she'd taken me in when nobody else wanted me, that I should help her now. I laughed. Actual laughter, sharp and bitter. I told her I owed her nothing. That she'd failed to protect a child in her care. That she'd blamed me for her husband's predatory behavior. That she could take her financial problems and her fake apology and leave me alone. She got nasty then, threatening to tell people at my school about my past, about how I was a troubled foster kid. I called campus security. They escorted her off campus. I filed a restraining order. The incident shook me badly. I had nightmares for weeks, woke up in cold sweats, felt watched everywhere I went. Miles tried to help, but he didn't fully understand the depth of the trauma. Our relationship started straining under the weight of my past. We didn't break up, but something shifted, a distance I didn't know how to bridge. That summer, between junior and senior year, Fred told me he'd been having health problems. Heart issues, nothing immediately life-threatening but serious enough to require monitoring and medication. I wanted to drop out of school, move home, take care of him. He refused, absolutely. Said his greatest pride was watching me build a life, and he wouldn't let me sacrifice that. We compromised. I'd finish my degree but come home every weekend. Those weekend visits became precious. Fred and I would cook together, play chess, talk about everything and nothing. He told me stories about his wife, about his career, about his regrets and joys. He updated his will during this time, though I didn't know the specifics. He told me I was his beneficiary, that everything he had would go to me. I protested. It felt wrong, mercenary. He was firm. I was his daughter. This was what parents did. They took care of their children, even after they were gone. Senior year, I threw myself into finishing strong. I graduated summa cum laude, top 5% of my class. Fred attended my graduation ceremony in a wheelchair, his health declining but his pride undiminished. He held my diploma, tears streaming down his face, and told me I was the greatest accomplishment of his life. Not his engineering career, not his inventions, not anything else. Me. Loving me and raising me was what he was most proud of. I got a job offer at a marketing firm in the city, good salary, room for advancement. Fred encouraged me to take it even though it meant moving farther away. He wanted me to have opportunities, to build a career, to live fully. So, I took the job, got an apartment, started my professional life. But I visited every month, called every week. He was declining, getting weaker. We both knew time was limited. We just didn't talk about it. I was 29 when I got the call. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was in the middle of a presentation at work when my phone buzzed repeatedly. I ignored it until the meeting ended, then saw 7 missed calls from Fred's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. My stomach dropped. I called back immediately. Fred had collapsed. Ambulance was taking him to County General Hospital. I needed to come now. I drove 2 hours in a panic, breaking every speed limit, praying to a God I wasn't sure I believed in. Please, not yet, please, let me have more time. I'd known this was coming, but knowing and facing it are different things. I wasn't ready. I'd never be ready to lose the only parent who'd ever truly been one. Fred was in the ICU when I arrived. Tubes and machines surrounded him, beeping and hissing, keeping him alive through technology. His eyes opened when I took his hand. He tried to smile, but it came out weak. I sat beside him for 3 days. Nurses came and went. Doctors delivered updates in somber tones. His heart was failing. There was nothing more they could do. It was just a matter of time. We talked during his lucid moments. He apologized for leaving me, for not being able to stay longer. I told him to stop. That had given me everything. Had saved me. Had shown me what love actually looked like. Had taught me I was worth saving. How could he apologize for that? He squeezed my hand and said the words that still break me. You deserved better than what they gave you, Chloe. You always deserved better. Now you have what you earned. Promise me you'll live fully. Promise me you'll be happy. I promised through tears. I promised even though I didn't know how to be happy without him. I promised because it was what he needed to hear. That night, with my hand in his, Frederick Ashford took his last breath. The machines flatlined. Nurses came running. But I knew he was already gone. The man who'd chosen me, who'd fought for me, who'd loved me unconditionally, was gone. The funeral was small. Fred hadn't been a social man. A few former colleagues from his engineering days came. Neighbors who'd watched us become a family. Dr. Hartman, who'd helped me heal. Mr. Ellis, my old teacher. Bryn flew in from across the country. Miles, though we'd broken up a year prior, came to support me. These people, this chosen family, surrounded me as we laid Fred to rest. I spoke at the service. I'd written something the night before, sitting in his house, surrounded by his books and his chess sets and the life we'd built together. I talked about what Hed done for me, how Hed seen value in a broken child nobody wanted, how Hed taught me that family is choice, not biology, how Hed given me a future when I had none. My voice broke multiple times. Bryn held my hand through the whole thing. 2 weeks after the funeral, his lawyer, Bertram Walsh, called me to his office for the reading of the will. Bertram was an old friend of Fred's, a distinguished man with silver hair and a kind demeanor. Hed helped Fred with the adoption years ago. He shook my hand with sympathy and led me into his office. The will was straightforward. Fred left me everything. The house, valued at $890,000 in the current market. Investment accounts totaling $1.2 million. Savings accounts with $610,000. Total estate value, $2.7 million. I stared at the numbers, unable to process. Fred had been comfortable, I'd known that, but I hadn't realized Hed been wealthy. Hed lived modestly, spending money on my education and our life together, but investing and saving the rest. Bertram handed me a letter Fred had written. I opened it with shaking hands. Fred's handwriting, careful and precise, filled 3 pages. He explained each decision. The house was mine because it was our home, where I'd healed, where I'd become who I was meant to be. The investments were for my future, to give me security and freedom to make choices based on what I wanted, not what I needed. The money was proof of his love, his way of taking care of me even after he was gone. He wrote about his pride in me, about watching me transform from a terrified, traumatized child into a strong, capable woman. He said loving me had been the greatest joy of his life, that I'd given him purpose in his final years. He thanked me for letting him be my father, and he ended with instructions: live fully, love deeply, and never let anyone make me feel less than the extraordinary person I was. I sobbed in Bertram's office. Ugly crying, the kind that hurts your chest and makes you hiccup. Bertram waited patiently, then explained the practical aspects of inheriting: taxes, paperwork, timelines. I nodded along but barely absorbed it. The money felt overwhelming. I didn't want money. I wanted Fred back. Over the next few months, I tried to build a life without him. I kept the house, couldn't bear to sell it. I walked through rooms filled with memories, sat in his reading chair, cooked in the kitchen where Hed taught me to make his famous spaghetti. I used some of the money to pay off my student loans. I donated $100,000 to the local foster care support organization. I wanted to honor Fred by helping other kids like I'd been. Then the messages started. It began with a Facebook friend request from someone named Reagan. The profile picture showed a woman about my age with blonde hair and familiar eyes. The message said she was my half-sister, that our parents wanted to reconnect, that family should stick together. I stared at that message for a long time. Reagan. One of the children Warren and Jolene had kept. One of the ones who'd been worth holding on to while I wasn't. I ignored it. Blocked the account. I wanted nothing to do with those people. They'd had 27 years to reach out. They'd chosen not to. I wasn't interested in a reunion now. But the messages kept coming. Different accounts, different names. Sawyer, my half-brother. Mallory, my other half-sister. Then, accounts that were clearly Warren and Jolene pretending to be other people. The messages got aggressive. You owe us. We're your real family. We raised you for 5 years. That money should be ours. I changed all my social media to private, blocked every account that contacted me, but they kept finding ways through. Messages to my work email, letters to Fred's house. They were relentless. And I was starting to get scared. 3 months after Fred's death, I came home from work to find a process server waiting at my door. He handed me an envelope, said it'd been served, and walked away. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a lawsuit. Warren Mitchell and Jolene Mitchell versus Chloe Ashford. They were suing me for the entire inheritance. $2.7 million. The complaint claimed that as my biological parents, they had legal rights to Fred's estate. That Fred had improperly adopted me, that I'd been manipulated as a child, that the inheritance rightfully belonged to them. I couldn't breathe. The audacity, the absolute cruelty of it. These people who'd abandoned me in a mall, who'd left me to be abused and neglected in foster care, who'd never once checked if I was alive or dead, were now demanding the money my real father had left me. I called Bertram Walsh. He referred me to Leonard Pritchard, a lawyer who specialized in family law and inheritance disputes. I met with Leonard the next day. Leonard was in his 50s, sharp-eyed and confident. He read through the lawsuit and shook his head. Frivolous, he said. No legal merit. But he warned me it would still go to trial. We'd have to fight it. It would be public, painful, and expensive. He estimated $70,000 to $80,000 in legal fees, possibly more depending on how long it dragged out. I told him to do whatever it took. I wouldn't let them win. Fred had given me that money. They had no right to it. None. The lawsuit became public record. Local news picked it up. The story was too sensational to ignore. Biological parents who'd abandoned their daughter now suing her for millions. Reporters tried to contact me. I refused all interviews. But Warren and Jolene had no such restraint. They gave tearful interviews to anyone who'd listen, spinning a story about young parents, who'd made a desperate mistake, who'd always loved me, who'd suffered for decades with guilt and loss. They claimed they'd wanted to find me, but the system had prevented it. They said they'd tried to regain custody but were blocked. All lies, complete fabrications. But some people believed them. Comment sections on news articles filled with people taking their side. Blood is thicker than water. She should share with her family. $2.7 million is more than one person needs. The judgment, the accusations, the lack of understanding cut deep. My workplace became uncomfortable. Colleagues gossiped. Some avoided me. Others asked invasive questions. My boss called me in to ask if the publicity would affect my work. I assured him it wouldn't, but I could see doubt in his eyes. I was becoming a liability, a distraction. The stress affected everything. I stopped sleeping more than a few hours a night. I lost 15 pounds. Dark circles appeared under my eyes. I looked haunted. Bryn flew in to stay with me for a week. She cooked, cleaned, forced me to eat, held me when I cried. She was furious on my behalf, kept saying she wanted to find Warren and Jolene and tell them exactly what she thought. Miles called regularly, checking in, offering support despite our relationship being over. These people, my chosen family, kept me functional when I wanted to disappear. Leonard prepared our defense. Discovery phase began, which meant providing financial records, depositions, testimony. Warren and Jolyn's lawyer, a woman named Gwendolyn Moss, was aggressive and ruthless. She made statements to the press painting me as an ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned her struggling parents. She twisted the narrative, making them victims and me the villain. The injustice of it made me physically sick. Gwendolyn tried to subpoena my therapy records. Leonard fought it, and the judge denied the request, but the attempt felt like a violation. They wanted to use my trauma against me, to paint me as mentally unstable or manipulated. Every legal maneuver felt like another attack, another attempt to break me down. I started having panic attacks again, the kind I hadn't experienced in years. It'd be at work or driving or trying to sleep, and suddenly I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but remember every terrible thing that had ever happened. Dr. Hartman increased our sessions to twice a week. She helped me develop coping strategies, reminded me I'd survived worse than this. But it didn't feel that way. This felt like the final betrayal, the ultimate proof that I'd never escape my past. The lawsuit consumed my life for the next 8 months. Every day brought new developments, new attacks, new reasons to question if I'd ever have peace. Leonard filed motion after motion to dismiss the case, arguing that Warren and Jolene had no legal standing. They'd voluntarily abandoned me, had their parental rights severed through their own actions, and had no claim to property left to me by my legal adoptive father. But Judge Harriet Pembroke, the woman assigned to our case, denied the motion to dismiss. She was a stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for being thorough. She wanted a full trial, wanted to hear all the evidence before making a decision. Leonard assured me this was actually good news in the long run. It meant we'd have the opportunity to expose Warren and Jolene's lies completely. But it also meant months more of this nightmare. The media circus intensified. Warren and Jolene hired a publicist. They appeared on local morning shows, wiping away tears, talking about their lost daughter. They described their current struggles. Warren had health problems, couldn't work consistently. Jolene had been in and out of jobs. They'd filed for bankruptcy twice. They made themselves look sympathetic, like victims of circumstance. What they didn't mention was the gambling addiction that had destroyed their finances. The multiple failed business ventures where they'd taken investors' money and disappeared. The pattern of bad choices stretching back decades. Leonard was compiling all of it, building our case, but in the court of public opinion, they were winning. People felt sorry for them. I stopped reading comments on articles. Stopped checking social media at all. But I couldn't avoid everything. Coworkers would mention things they'd seen. Strangers recognized me in public and shared unsolicited opinions. One woman in a grocery store told me I should be ashamed, that parents deserve respect no matter what. I left my cart in the middle of the aisle and walked out. The discovery phase revealed how calculated their lawsuit was. Leonard found search records showing Warren had Googled Fred's name within days of his obituary being published. Had researched obituary notices, found Fred's death announcement, seen the mention of his estate. Had then searched for me, found my address through public records, and started planning the lawsuit. This wasn't about reconnecting with a lost daughter. This was about money, pure and simple. We also discovered something else. Warren and Jolene had another child after me, a son named Wesley who they'd also placed in foster care when he was 6. Wesley was now 24, estranged from them, struggling with addiction and trauma from his own foster care experiences. Leonard found him and asked if he'd be willing to testify. Wesley agreed. He wanted the world to know what kind of parents they really were. The depositions were brutal. I had to sit across a table from Warren and Jolene for the first time in 27 years and answer questions, while Gwendolyn Moss tried to make me look bad. Warren looked older, grayer, with the worn-down appearance of someone who'd lived hard. Jolene had gained weight, her face puffy and tired. Neither could look at me directly. Gwendolyn asked why I'd never tried to contact them. Why I'd never expressed interest in rebuilding a relationship. Why I'd cut them out completely. I explained, calmly and clearly, that you don't contact people who abandon you in a mall, that I owed nothing to people who chose not to raise me, that Fred had been my father in every way that mattered, and they'd lost any claim to me the day they drove away from Riverside Mall. When it was Leonard's turn to depose Warren, the truth started coming out. Warren couldn't keep his story straight. He contradicted himself multiple times about why they'd abandoned me, about what they'd done to try to find me afterward. Leonard produced evidence. No missing person report, no contact with social services, no attempts to regain custody. Warren got defensive, angry. Head expected sympathy, not accountability. Jolene's deposition was worse. She cried through most of it, playing the victim. But Leonard was patient, methodical. He walked her through every lie Shed told the press, confronted her with facts she couldn't dispute. By the end, even Gwendolyn looked uncomfortable. The case they'd built was falling apart. Then came the testimony about their other children. Reagan, Sawyer, and Mallory were all named as co-plaintiffs. They claimed they'd always wanted to know me, that they'd asked about me growing up, that our parents had spoken about me lovingly. Leonard deposed each of them. Their stories didn't match. Reagan claimed Shed known about me since childhood. Sawyer said Head only found out recently. Mallory couldn't remember when Shed learned. They were lying, badly. Reagan was the most aggressive. Shed clearly been promised a cut of any settlement. She testified that I was selfish, that family should share, that $2.7 million was more than I needed. Leonard asked her directly, had she ever tried to contact me before the inheritance? No. Had she sent birthday cards, letters, any acknowledgement of my existence? No. Did she know anything about my life, my childhood in foster care, what I'd been through? No. She just wanted money. The pre-trial phase lasted 6 months. My legal fees climbed to $68,000 and counting. Leonard was worth every penny, but the cost was crushing in more than financial ways. I was exhausted, depleted, running on empty. Work performance slipped. I was written up twice for missed deadlines. My boss, sympathetic at first, was losing patience. The lawsuit was affecting my ability to do my job. Bryn suggested I take a leave of absence, focus on the trial, protect my mental health, but I couldn't afford to lose my job on top of everything else. I needed the routine, the distraction, the proof that I was still a functional adult. So I pushed through, barely sleeping, barely eating, held together by coffee and determination. 2 weeks before trial, Gwendolyn made a settlement offer. If I gave Warren and Jolene $1 million, they'd drop the lawsuit. Leonard brought me the offer with disgust on his face. He recommended rejecting it absolutely. This wasn't about compromise. This was about justice, I agreed. We were going to trial. The final discovery came 3 days before trial started. Leonard's investigator uncovered Warren's criminal record. Multiple fraud charges over the years, some convictions, some plea deals. Warren had represented himself as a reformed, struggling father. But he was a con artist with a decades-long pattern of scamming people. This information hadn't been disclosed in the initial filing. It was grounds for sanctions against Gwendolyn's firm. Leonard also found the financial records showing Warren and Jolene had researched how much foster care stipends paid. They'd calculated that keeping 3 children versus 4 would save them money while maximizing government assistance for the ones they kept. They'd done a cost-benefit analysis on their own children. I was the one who didn't make financial sense. That's why they left me. Not because they couldn't handle 4 kids. Because I wasn't profitable enough. Reading those documents broke something in me. I'd spent years wondering what was wrong with me, why I wasn't worth keeping. The answer was dollars and cents. I was a budget cut, a financial decision, not even important enough to be an emotional choice, just math, cold, cruel math. The night before trial, I couldn't sleep. I sat in Fred's reading chair, surrounded by his books, and tried to channel his strength. Head believed in me. Had seen my worth when nobody else had. I had to believe in myself now. Had to fight for what Head given me, for the life Head wanted me to have. I owed him that. I owed myself that. I spoke to his memory, to the empty room. Help me be strong tomorrow. Help me show them they can't hurt me anymore. Help me win. The house settled around me, creaking and familiar. It wasn't magic. It wasn't a sign. But it felt like Fred was there anyway, like had always been, like he always would be. The trial began on a Monday morning in late September. The courthouse was an imposing building with marble floors and high ceilings that made every sound echo. Media trucks lined the street outside. Reporters tried to shove microphones in my face as I walked up the steps. Leonard and his associate formed a barrier, got me inside safely. My hands shook so badly I had to clasp them together. Judge Pembroke's courtroom was packed. Public seating filled with curious onlookers, a few supporters of mine, and what looked like supporters of Warren and Jolene. I sat at the defendant's table with Leonard, trying to breathe steadily, trying to look calm. Across the aisle, Warren and Jolene sat with Gwendolyn. This was the closest it'd been to them since depositions. Jolene glanced over once, face crumpling like she might cry. I looked away. Judge Pembroke entered. We all stood. She was intimidating in her robes, authoritative and serious. She outlined the proceedings, set expectations, and reminded everyone this was a court of law, not a media circus. Then Gwendolyn began her opening statement. She painted a picture of young parents overwhelmed by circumstances, who'd made a terrible mistake but had always loved their daughter. She claimed Fred had taken advantage of the situation, had turned me against my biological family, and that as blood relatives, Warren and Jolene had rights to the inheritance. Leonard's opening was devastating. He laid out the timeline. The abandonment, deliberate and calculated. The 27 years of no contact. The sudden interest only after money appeared. He promised to show this wasn't about family reunion. It was about greed, pure and simple. He promised to prove Warren and Jolene had no legal or moral claim to anything Fred had left me. Gwendolyn called Warren to the stand first. Head cleaned up for court, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit, hair combed neatly. He played the remorseful father perfectly. Described the abandonment as a temporary plan that went wrong. Said they'd intended to come back for me within hours, but got scared when they saw police. Said they'd wanted to reclaim me but were told they couldn't. Said they'd thought about me every single day for 27 years. Leonard's cross-examination shredded the performance. He produced the police reports showing no missing person filing. Showed records proving Warren and Jolene had been contacted by police and admitted the abandonment was intentional. Showed that parental rights had been terminated due to voluntary abandonment, not because of system error. Warren stammered, contradicted himself, got angry. By the end, his story had more holes than substance. Jolene testified next. She cried from the moment she sat down, talked about how hard life had been, how overwhelmed Shed felt, how Shed made a choice she regretted every day. She looked at me while testifying, trying to make eye contact, trying to convey remorse. I kept my face neutral. Leonard asked her pointed questions. When exactly had she tried to contact me? Never directly, she admitted. Why had she only reached out after Fred died? She had no good answer. Had she sent birthday cards over the years? No. Christmas cards? No. Any acknowledgement at all that she had a fourth child out there? No. The half-siblings testified over the next 2 days. Reagan, trying to look professional in a cheap business suit, claimed Shed always wanted a relationship with me. Leonard asked when Shed first searched for me on social media. 6 months ago, she admitted. Why then? Shed seen Fred's obituary, she said, confirming Shed only become interested after the inheritance. Sawyer and Mallory's testimonies followed similar patterns. They'd known about me vaguely but had never cared enough to look for me until money entered the picture. Then Leonard called his witnesses. Wesley, my half-brother I'd never known about, testified about his own abandonment at age 6. He described Warren and Jolene as neglectful, abusive, more interested in gambling and schemes than parenting. Had aged out of foster care at 18, struggled with addiction, nearly died twice. He said they'd never tried to find him either. His testimony established a pattern that devastated the other side's credibility. Dr. Hartman testified about my trauma, my therapy, the years of work to overcome what had been done to me. She explained attachment disorders, PTSD, the psychological impact of abandonment and abuse. She'd treated me for over 20 years. She knew my history better than anyone. Gwendolyn tried to use this against me, implying I was mentally unstable. But Dr. Hartman shut that down hard. I was resilient, she said. A survivor. Strong enough to build a life despite everything. Mr. Ellis, my old teacher, testified about the adoption, about watching Fred and me become a family. He spoke about Fred's character, his dedication to me, the clear love between us. Had seen us at school events, debate competitions, graduations. Had witnessed real family, not biology, pretending to be family. Then it was my turn. I'd been dreading this moment for months. Walking to the witness stand felt like approaching an execution. I swore to tell the truth and sat down, acutely aware of everyone watching. Leonard started gently, walking me through my early childhood, the abandonment, the foster care experiences. I told it all, every horrible detail. The basement, the predatory foster father, the group home violence, the fear and pain and trauma. I described meeting Fred, the slow build of trust, the adoption battle, the life we'd built together. I explained what Head meant to me, how Head saved me in every way a person can be saved. I talked about his final days, his death, the grief that still felt fresh. When Leonard asked what Fred's inheritance meant to me, I had to pause to collect myself. It means he valued me. It means he believed I deserved security and future and choice. It means he was my father, truly my father, and he wanted to take care of me even after he was gone. That money isn't just money. It's proof that I was worth loving. And nobody gets to take that away from me. The courtroom was silent. Several jurors were visibly emotional, one woman wiping tears. Judge Pembroke looked at me with something like respect. Then Gwendolyn stood for cross-examination, and the attack began. She tried to paint me as vindictive, as someone who held grudges, who'd never given my biological parents a chance. She asked why I'd never reached out to them as an adult. You don't reach out to people who threw you away like garbage. I said, voice steady despite the anger burning in my chest. You don't owe anything to people who chose not to raise you. Fred was my father. They were just biology. And biology isn't family. Gwendolyn tried a different angle. Asked if I really needed $2.7 million. Suggested I was being selfish by not sharing. I looked her in the eye and said the inheritance wasn't about need. It was about what Fred wanted, about his choice, about honoring his wishes. Head earned that money. Head decided where it should go. Nobody else's opinion mattered. The cross-examination lasted 3 hours. Gwendolyn tried everything to break me, to make me look bad, to create sympathy for Warren and Jolene. But I'd survived things far worse than her questions. She couldn't touch me. Not really. When I finally stepped down, exhausted but standing, Leonard squeezed my shoulder and whispered that I'd done brilliantly. The final nail in Warren and Jolene's case came from Leonard's financial expert. Head analyzed their spending, their searches, their timeline. He showed the jury exactly when they'd discovered Fred's wealth, exactly when they'd decided to file suit. He presented evidence that they'd consulted with multiple lawyers about the best strategy to extract money from me. He showed emails between Warren and Jolene discussing how much they could get, how they'd spend it, what they'd buy. They'd even joked about my guilt money being their retirement fund. Gwendolyn had no rebuttal. The evidence was damning, undeniable. Her closing argument tried to lean on emotion, on the idea that parents deserve forgiveness, that blood ties matter, but it rang hollow after everything we'd presented. Leonard's closing was powerful. He reminded the jury that legal parenthood requires more than biology. It requires care, love, sacrifice. Fred had been my parent. Warren and Jolene had abdicated that role willingly. They had no claim to his legacy. Judge Pembroke gave instructions to the jury. They deliberated for 4 hours. I waited in a private room with Leonard, Bryn, and a few other supporters. Every minute felt like an hour. I couldn't eat, couldn't sit still, couldn't think about anything except what would happen if I lost. If Warren and Jolene won, it would mean my entire life, everything Fred had done for me, meant nothing. It would mean biology trumped love. I couldn't accept that. The bailiff came to get us. The jury had reached a verdict. We filed back into the courtroom. Warren and Jolene looked nervous. Gwendolyn resigned. Judge Pembroke asked the jury foreperson if they'd reached a verdict. Yes, they had. Found in favor of the defendant, Chloe Ashford, on all counts. Case dismissed with prejudice, meaning it couldn't be refiled. The relief hit me so hard my knees buckled. Leonard caught my arm, steadied me. Judge Pembroke made a statement for the record. She said the court found no legal or moral basis for the claim. That blood relation doesn't entitle abandonment and subsequent financial exploitation. She awarded me recovery of legal fees, meaning Warren and Jolene would be responsible for my $78,000 in attorney costs. Warren's face went red. Jolene sobbed. Gwendolyn looked like she wanted to disappear. The jury filed out, some of them glancing at me with sympathy, with support. The courtroom erupted in whispers and movement. Media rushed out to report the verdict, and I just stood there, still processing. We won. We actually won. Outside the courthouse, Leonard gave a brief statement to the press. He outlined the verdict, explained that justice had prevailed, and requested that our family be given privacy. Reporters shouted questions. I didn't answer any. I let Leonard handle everything while Bryn and I walked to her car. The moment we got inside, I broke down. Tears I'd been holding for months poured out. Relief, grief, exhaustion, all of it overwhelming me at once. Warren tried to approach me in the parking lot. He pushed through the crowd, calling my name, saying we needed to talk. Security stopped him, but he shouted anyway. You're selfish. We're your real family. This isn't over, his voice carried across the lot. I turned, looked at him directly for the first time, and said words I'd been holding for 27 years. Real family doesn't leave a 5-year-old alone in a mall. Fred was my real family. You were just biology. Jolene appeared beside Warren, reaching toward me like she wanted to hug me, like we could suddenly have some tearful reconciliation. I stepped back. Don't touch me. You lost that right 27 years ago. Security escorted them away. I watched them go, feeling powerful, liberated. They couldn't hurt me anymore. They had no power over me. The media coverage shifted dramatically after the verdict. Articles that had been sympathetic to Warren and Jolene now called them con artists, manipulators, abusers. Public opinion turned. Comments sections filled with support for me, condemnation for them. It felt good but also strange. I didn't need strangers' validation. I knew the truth. The jury knew the truth. That was enough. I took a month off work. My boss, having followed the trial, was understanding, had seen what I'd been through, apologized for his earlier doubts. I drove to Fred's house, my house, and spent time healing. I scattered some of Fred's ashes in the park, where Wed played chess on Sunday afternoons. I sat on our favorite bench and talked to him like he was still there. We won, Dad. They can't hurt me anymore. Thank you for everything you gave me. Thank you for showing me what love actually looks like. A breeze rustled through the trees. Nothing magical, just wind. But it felt like Fred heard me anyway. Like some part of him was still watching over me, proud of how I'd fought, how I'd stood up for myself. I realized something sitting there. Fred's gift wasn't just the money or the house. It was the foundation he'd built in me. The strength, the self-worth, the knowledge that I deserved good things. That was the real inheritance. I started putting my life back together piece by piece, returned to work with renewed focus, used the inheritance responsibly, kept the house as my home base, invested most of the money conservatively, ensuring long-term security, donated $200,000 to foster care reform organizations, specifically programs that helped kids transition out of the system. I wanted to help others like me, kids who'd been failed by the system but could still build good lives. I started a scholarship fund in Fred's name, the Frederick Ashford Scholarship for Former Foster Youth. It provided college tuition assistance to kids aging out of foster care. The first year, we helped 3 students. That number grew. Knowing I was using Fred's money to help others heal felt right. It honored his memory in a way nothing else could. Dr. Hartman and I continued therapy, processing not just the trial but decades of trauma. I was learning, slowly, that healing isn't linear. Some days I felt strong, invincible. Other days, small things triggered memories and panic. But I was learning to be gentle with myself, to recognize progress even when it felt slow. 6 months after the trial, I received an unexpected letter. Handwritten envelope, return address I didn't recognize. Inside was a letter from Reagan, my half-sister. She apologized. Said she'd been pressured by Warren and Jolene, hadn't understood the full truth until the trial. She'd heard my testimony, heard what it'd been through, and felt ashamed of her part in the lawsuit. She said she wanted to know me, if I was willing, but understood if I wasn't. No pressure, no expectations. I sat with that letter for weeks. Part of me wanted to throw it away, protect myself from any potential hurt, but another part was curious. Reagan had been a child when I was abandoned. She hadn't made that choice. Maybe there was possibility there. Maybe we could build something on our own terms, separate from Warren and Jolene. I agreed to meet her for coffee. We met at a neutral location, a cafe neither of us frequented. Reagan looked nervous, genuine. We talked for 2 hours. She told me about growing up with Warren and Jolene, about the chaos, the neglect, the emotional abuse. She'd escaped at 18, put herself through community college, built a life separate from them. She hadn't known about Wesley, about the pattern of abandonment. Learning the full truth during the trial had devastated her. I told her about Fred, about the life he'd built, about what healing looked like. We didn't become instant close sisters. Trust doesn't work that way. But we exchanged numbers, agreed to stay in touch, to build something slow and careful. It was a start. Maybe not every biological connection was toxic. Maybe some relationships could be salvaged. I started dating again, carefully, slowly. I met Graham through mutual friends. He was a social worker, someone who understood trauma and healing, who didn't run when I explained my past. He was patient, kind, steady in ways that reminded me of Fred. We took things slow. I wasn't sure I knew how to be in a healthy relationship, but I was willing to try. A year after the trial, I stood in Fred's house, my house, looking at the framed photo on the mantel. Fred's last birthday before he died, his smile genuine, his eyes proud. I touched the frame gently. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for showing me I was worth choosing. The words felt like prayer, like promise, like peace. I looked out the window at the garden he'd been planting. Flowers Fred would have loved, vegetables we would have cooked together. I was building a life here, in this house, in this future Fred had made possible. The lawsuit was over. Warren and Jolene had faded back into irrelevance. I'd won, not just legally but emotionally. I'd proven to myself that I was strong, worthy, valuable. The money in my bank account wasn't just numbers, it was security, freedom, proof that someone had loved me enough to provide for my future. It meant I could make choices based on what I wanted, not what I needed. I could help others. I could build the life I'd always dreamed of. I could be safe. For the first time in 27 years, I felt truly safe. Not because no one would ever try to hurt me again. People always will. But because I knew, deep in my bones, that I could survive it. I'd survived abandonment, abuse, betrayal, a public lawsuit. I'd survived everything they threw at me and came out stronger. Fred had given me more than an inheritance. Had given me proof that I deserved love, that family is choice, not biology. That the people who throw you away don't define your worth. The ones who stay, who fight for you, who choose you every single day, those are the ones who matter. And I would never let anyone make me feel worthless again. That lesson was worth more than $2.7 million. That lesson was priceless. And as I stood in my garden, in my home, in my life that Id fought so hard to build, I finally understood what Fred had been trying to teach me all along. I was enough. Just as I was, just me, I was always enough. So here's my question for all of you watching. Have you ever had to fight for what was rightfully yours against people who thought they deserved it more? Have you had someone in your life like Fred, who chose you when nobody else did? Drop your stories in the comments below. I want to hear about the people who saved you, the battles you won, the moments you realized you were stronger than you thought. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel because there are so many more stories of survival, resilience, and people overcoming impossible odds. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're not defined by the people who hurt them, that they can build beautiful lives from broken beginnings. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. I hope wherever you are, whatever you're fighting, you remember that you're worth fighting for. That the right people will see your value, even when others don't. And that sometimes, the family you choose is more real than the family you're born into. Stay strong. Stay hopeful. And never let anyone convince you that you're not enough. You are. You always were. Take care of yourselves.